You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
We'll try to spice it.
Who art Ed? Mr. Wood art Ed me.
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, where we explore visual arts in an audio medium. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and this week we are on round 5 of our annual Arts Madness tournament. We are down to the final 4 artists. We started off with 64 diverse artists working from different times, different places, different media, and now after several head-to-head matchups and thousands of votes, we have just the 4 greatest as chosen by our listeners in this year's tournament. In the first matchup, we've got Jim Dine versus Yayoi Kusama. Now, this is interesting as a matchup because Jim Dine is a contemporary sort of poppy artist, and one of the symbols that he has appropriated, claimed in his artwork, is the heart. The heart is very closely associated with Jim Dine in the art world. And, of course, in all sorts of contexts, the heart is a symbol of love, and I think Jim Dine uses it in that way as well. And he's up against Yayoi Kusama. Now, Kusama was last year's winner of the tournament, and the piece that we have from her is Love is Calling from 2014. This was an installation piece. She had those organic shapes twisting and curving through the space. They're sort of inflatable light ups and these bright, bold neon colors, which seems fun and positive and has this energy to it. And in addition to that, in the installation, she would have audio playing of herself recorded reading poetry that she wrote, Love is Calling. So there we have the lithograph of the symbol of love up against an installation, a sensory experience immersing the viewer in an environment of love. And the other matchup we've got for our semifinals on the other end of the brackets, we've got Stuart Semple up against Katsushika Hokusai. Now, there's not a ton of commonality between these two artists, at least as I see them. Katsushika Hokusai was a 19th century Japanese printmaker. He's well known for his woodcut prints and specifically his multiple views of Mount Fuji. The Great Wave off Kanagawa was a part of a series of prints that he created in his 36 views of Mount Fuji. And as I said, he's up against Stuart Semple, an artist based out of the UK, a contemporary artist who works in all sorts of different media. And Semple, I got to say, hat is off to him. He works in a variety of different ways, including printmaking. I guess that's the only real connection between the two that I'm seeing from my sort of mile wide and inch deep superficial look at all of their different artists and their work. And I think for this one, what I want to do to wrap up this mini episode, since we're down to our semifinals, and I have been talking so much about the different pieces and the different matchups that I'm keeping an eye on, I want to give the audience a chance to have their say in this. So what I'm going to do is read off just a few statements from people who filled out the prediction form at the beginning of the tournament. I asked, who did you think would win and why? And so I'm going to read one statement that was submitted about each of those 4 different artists. This first one is about Jim Dine, and this came to us from a student in the Ferris School District. I think that was one of the districts out in Texas, if I recall correctly. And they said, I think Jim Dine deserves to win because his story is very interesting and his artwork isn't like the other ones. It's more simple and it's really cool. Now, making the case for Yayoi Kusama, I see here I've got a comment that was left by a student from Baltimore Public Schools. And she said she likes Yayoi Kusama because of how colorful and fun her artwork is. And that seemed to be a sentiment that was expressed in lots of different ways by lots of different people. Most of the people who talked about Kusama said they liked the colors, they liked the fun shapes, they liked how it transformed the space, but a lot of it had to do with the color scheme. I guess people like that sort of neon color scheme. It is certainly very bright, bold, and eye-catching, particularly in a darkened room. There's a good contrast there. Making the case for Katsushika Hokusai, I had a student who said, this artwork deserves to win because it's a wave like a tsunami, and the details about the water is all perfect. It was also made when they didn't have machines that could make something the way we have today. It was much harder for them to produce. A lot more work went into creating all of those details in the woodcut. And the final comment I'm going to read came from somebody in Coachella Valley School District out in California. That student chose Stuart Semple. And they said, what I like about Stuart Semple's artwork is the fact that I can actually see and feel his artwork. It reminds me of my feelings. I don't express myself so much, and I'm always pretending to feel good about any situation. And somehow, his artwork reminded me of myself. He deserves to win because I feel like most people go through the same feeling while looking at his artwork. That is a powerful testament to Stuart Semple's artwork, helping a student to feel seen. Now, I would encourage more people to weigh in on all of the different matchups. Please go to www.whoartedpodcast.com and vote for your favorites in the Final Four, our semifinals for this year's tournament. We've got just 2 matchups, 4 different artists. Only 2 can advance to our final round next week. This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted. If you found this tolerable, please like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week in the show notes, on Twitter at WoodArtEd, and on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.